What would you do if you woke up knowing today might be your last? You're standing on a dusty plain in the middle of nowhere. The sun hasn't fully risen yet. Your armor feels heavier than usual. And across that field, stretching so far you can't even see where it ends, stands 250,000 soldiers waiting to kill you. That's the reality Alexander of Macedon faced on the morning of October 1st, 331 BCE. 250,000 men. The largest fighting force the ancient world had ever assembled. Cavalry units from lands most Greeks couldn't pronounce. War elephants that made the ground shake with every step. Chariots with blades welded to their wheels, specifically designed to slice through human bodies like wheat. And standing against all of that, 47,000 Macedonians, led by a 25-year-old who had never tasted defeat. A young king who was about to bet everything, his army, his legacy, his life, on a single afternoon. By the time the sun set that day, one of the greatest empires in human history would cease to exist. A king who ruled over millions would abandon his own soldiers and run. And a military commander barely old enough to be called a man would become ruler of the known world. How did that happen? How do you beat an army 5 times your size? How do you bring down an empire that stood for 2 centuries? Stay with me, because what happened at Gaugamela wasn't luck. It wasn't divine intervention. It was cold, calculated brilliance executed under conditions that would break most men. Now let's rewind a bit, because to understand why this battle mattered so much, you need to understand the man at the center of it. Alexander didn't fight wars the way other generals did. He didn't play it safe. He didn't hold reserves for emergencies. Every single engagement, he approached like it was the last one he'd ever fight, win completely or die trying. There was no middle ground. 3 years before Gaugamela, he crossed into Persian territory with just 35,000 soldiers. Think about that. He invaded the largest empire on earth with an army smaller than some cities. Not to negotiate, not to test their defenses. He came to destroy them. His first major clash happened at the Granicus River. Persian forces lined the opposite bank, waiting. Any reasonable commander would have scouted, regrouped, found a safer crossing point. Alexander didn't hesitate. He charged straight into the water, leading from the front. An enemy axe split his helmet open. He nearly died in the first minutes of his campaign. He survived, and the Persians broke. A year later, the empire sent Darius himself to deal with this upstart. The King of Kings, that was his actual title, personally took command of an army meant to end Alexander's advance once and for all. They met at Issus, in a narrow coastal pass. The terrain neutralized Persian numbers. Alexander saw Darius in his chariot, surrounded by guards, watching from a safe distance. So he did what no one expected. He charged directly at the king. Darius ran, left his mother behind, left his wife, left his children, left his treasury, just turned his chariot around and fled while his soldiers died, trying to cover his escape. That moment changed everything. Suddenly, Alexander wasn't just a foreign invader. He was the man who made the great king run. After Issus, cities started surrendering without a fight. Tyre resisted, and Alexander spent 7 months reducing it to rubble as a warning to anyone else who might consider defiance. Egypt didn't even try. They crowned him pharaoh the moment he arrived. But here's the thing. Darius was still alive, still ruling from the heart of his empire, still commanding vast resources and loyal armies. As long as the king lived, Persia could rebuild, could recover, could try again. And Darius had learned from his mistakes. By 331 BCE, both men understood what was coming. There would be one more battle, one final confrontation, and whoever won would control the world. This time, Darius chose a ground. No more narrow passes where his numbers meant nothing. He selected a place called Gaugamela, a wide, flat, endless plain where cavalry could maneuver freely, where his superior numbers could finally count for something. He even had his engineers level parts of the field to make it smoother. No rocks, no ditches, just open space where chariots could build speed and elephants could charge unimpeded. In Darius's mind, the math was simple. 5 soldiers for every one of Alexander's. Cavalry that could loop around and strike from behind. weapons specifically designed to counter Macedonian infantry. This wasn't going to be a battle. It was going to be an execution. Alexander saw the same field and came to a completely different conclusion. The night before the engagement, some of his officers came to him with a proposal: launch a night attack, hit them while they're sleeping, avoid the trap entirely. Alexander said no. I will not steal this victory like a thief in the darkness. He wanted Darius to see what was coming, to watch his empire crumble in broad daylight, to know exactly who had beaten him and how. That night, while his army tried to sleep, Alexander walked the battlefield alone. He studied the terrain. He examined the Persian formations visible in the torchlight, and somewhere in those quiet hours, he figured out exactly how to win. Dawn came. Both armies deployed. Now pause here and really picture what Alexander's men were looking at. The Persian host stretched across the horizon, different banners from different provinces. Cavalry units wearing armor their enemies had never seen before. Scythian horse archers who could hit targets at full gallop. Bactrian riders who'd been training for this moment their entire lives. At the front, 200 chariots with those horrific, scything blades. Behind them, war elephant from India, living siege weapons meant to terrify as much as kill. And at the center, surrounded by his royal guard, sat Darius III, watching, waiting for the foregone conclusion. Look at the other side of that field. 47,000 soldiers with nowhere to hide. No reinforcements coming. No backup plan. The phalanx formed the center. Heavy infantry locked shoulder to shoulder, each man carrying an 18-foot spear called a sarissa. When they moved together, it was like watching a single organism bristling with deadly points. On the flanks, cavalry. Alexander himself commanded the right wing with his companion cavalry, his personal strike force, the sharpest weapon in his arsenal. On the left, an old general named Parmenion held command, tasked with one job: don't collapse. Just hold. Buy time for whatever Alexander was planning. Before the fighting started, Alexander rode along the front of his army. His men watched him pass, this young king who led them through impossible victories again and again. He stopped and spoke. Look at them. They fight because they're told to. They fight for gold, for masters they've never met. You fight because this ground belongs to whoever takes it. There's no retreat. There's no other option. Everything we've built leads to this moment. He paused. Watch where I ride. Follow when I move. And if I fall today, don't stop. Better to die standing here than spend the rest of your lives knowing fear made the decision for you. Silence. Then the roar. Shields crashing against shields. Spears striking bronze. Not celebration. Commitment. A sound that rolled across the plain and reached the Persian lines. The battle began. And immediately, Alexander did something strange. Instead of charging forward, he ordered his entire formation to drift slowly to the right, away from the center, away from the level ground Darius had prepared. It looked like a mistake, like he was trying to escape before the fighting even started. Bessus, commanding the Persian left flank, understood the danger immediately. If Alexander slipped past the prepared killing ground, the whole trap failed. So Bessus extended his cavalry outward, matching Alexander's movement, stretching his line thinner and thinner to prevent the Macedonians from getting around him. That was exactly what Alexander wanted. Every unit Bessus pulled outward was a unit removed from the center, from Darius, from the one spot that actually mattered. Alexander kept drifting. Bessus kept extending. The center thinned. Finally, Bessus made a decision. He couldn't wait any longer. He ordered his cavalry to charge. Thousands of riders surged forward, crashing into the Macedonian right. Dust rose. Men screamed. Bronze met flesh. The bait was taken. Darius watched this from the center and believed the moment had arrived. He ordered the chariots forward. Those terrible machines began their charge, blades spinning, building momentum toward the Macedonian phalanx. Behind them, the war elephants started moving. The ground itself seemed to vibrate. Any other army would have panicked, would have broken formation and run, would have died trampled and sliced into chaos. The phalanx opened lanes. Gaps appeared in the formation, deliberate, controlled. The chariots screamed through empty corridors. finding nothing to cut. Skirmishers hurled javelins at the drivers. Horses collapsed. Wheels caught on bodies and spun uselessly. The elephants met the same fate. Harassed by light infantry, blinded by missiles, they staggered sideways through the gaps. The phalanx closed behind them and finished them off with methodical efficiency. Darius's trap had failed. Meanwhile, on the opposite flank, Mazias threw everything he had at Parmenion. The fighting there turned desperate. Lines bent. Men died. Parmenion held barely, but he was running out of time. Darius saw the chaos and committed his reserves. Tens of thousands of infantry surging forward at once, pressing into Macedonian center, trying to break them through sheer weight. Every Persian unit was now engaged, every option spent, and that's when Alexander saw it. A gap, a weakness in the Persian left center where units had been pulled away, where the line had thinned, where order had broken down, and directly behind that gap sat Darius. Alexander gathered his companion cavalry into a wedge formation. Then he charged, not at the army, at the king. The wedge punched through the weakened line like a spear through cloth. Suddenly, the fighting wasn't somewhere else. It was right in front of Darius. Guards fell. Officers died. Alexander pushed closer. For a moment, it seemed like the two kings might actually meet, like this would end in single combat, the way wars used to end in the old stories. Then Darius broke. For the second time, the King of Kings turned and ran. His chariot wheeled around. His guards scrambled to follow. And the moment he fled, the spell shattered. The Persian center stopped fighting, not because they were defeated, but because their reason for fighting had just disappeared. Orders stopped coming. Units looked around for leadership that wasn't there. What had been an empire became a crowd. Bessus saw the collapse and pulled back. Mazias kept fighting for a while longer, unaware that the war was already over. Alexander wanted to pursue, to chase Darius into the mountains and end this completely. But a messenger arrived. Parmenion was in trouble. The left flank was about to break. Most conquerors wouldn't have turned back. The prize was escaping. Glory was galloping away. But Alexander made a different choice. He reinforced Parmenion, stabilized the line, and only when the field was secure did the battle truly end. Darius escaped, but his empire didn't. Everything changed after Gaugamela. Before that day, Persia was still a functioning power. Governors controlled provinces. Armies defended cities. The machinery of empire kept turning. After that day, it all unraveled. Not because Alexander conquered every inch of territory. He hadn't. But because he'd broken the command structure. The king had fled. The center had collapsed. And everyone watching understood that Persian authority was finished. But there was still one problem. Darius was alive. And as long as the king lived, resistance could reform. Loyalists could rally. The empire could be rebuilt. So Alexander pushed east, not chasing land or treasure, chasing legitimacy. He had to finish what Gaugamela had started. That pursuit led him into the mountains, into terrain that favored defenders, into a narrow pass where a smaller Persian force waited in ambush, hoping to accomplish what 250,000 soldiers had failed to do, stop Alexander completely. What happened at the Persian Gate would push Alexander closer to defeat than anything he'd faced before. And that's a story you need to hear. If this kind of content is what you came for, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a like. It takes 2 seconds and helps more than you know. Next time, we're heading into those mountains. And trust me, you don't want to miss what happens there.